If you're listening to this, take a second to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and tell me in the comments. If your best friend was in danger, how far would you go to protect them? Now, let me take you somewhere far beyond the stars, where one loyal heart will soon be tested in ways no alien ever imagined. The chamber was built to humble lesser beings, towering obsidian arches, walls etched with the history of the Galactic Union in languages no single mind could read, and a dais where the senior council lounged in a display of idle power. For most species, entering that hall meant awe, even fear. For Captain Mason Hale, it was simply another room that smelled faintly of ozone and ego. He strode down the center aisle, his uniform crisp, boots silent against the blackened stone. The creature at his side padded forward with perfect confidence, nails clicking in a slow, deliberate rhythm. A German shepherd, tall and muscular, his coat a storm of black and tan, ears high, eyes alert. His name was Rex, and he wasn't wearing the slightest trace of intimidation. The murmuring began before they reached the center circle. "Is that an Earth animal?" one diplomat whispered in clipped Benerian. "They call them pets," another replied, his tendrils curling in amusement. "Domesticated for companionship, absurd." Hale caught the whispers, but he didn't look at them. His gaze locked on the presiding official, a ribboned, six-eyed being named Magistrate Ilrin. Rex matched his pace without a single glance toward the dozens of alien eyes watching them. When the magistrate finally spoke, his voice carried the oily weight of derision. "Captain Hale, the Union welcomes your report. But I must ask, for the sake of decorum, why have you brought a predator into these chambers?" "He's not a predator," Hale said evenly. "He's my partner." Laughter rippled around the chamber, sharp, chittering sounds from insectoid throats, hissing chuckles from scaled lips. A pale, avian delegate tilted her head. "Partner? That beast obeys your commands for food. You own him, yes? A possession. A pet." Hale let the silence stretch a moment. Then slowly he reached down, scratched Rex behind the ear, and said, "He obeys because he trusts me. And if the day ever comes that I don't deserve that trust, he'll stop." A few murmurs shifted, less mocking now, though still skeptical. Railvek, the Union's appointed observer for human integration, studied the pair from his bench. Tall, reptilian, his scales a deep green that shimmered faintly under the chamber's lights, Railvek had served in more wars than most species had centuries. He knew the look of soldiers, and though the human wore a captain's uniform, it was the dog's eyes that held his attention. They were a soldier's eyes. "Curious," Railvek muttered to himself, making a mental note. "As if they share one mind." The meeting moved on. Trade agreements, boundary disputes, the usual political theater, until the topic shifted to the Creel. The name drew an immediate tension across the room. The Creel were not part of the Union. They were raiders, slavers, a nomadic war clan that skirted the edges of civilized space. Recently their attacks had grown bolder. "Several civilian transports have been taken in the past month," Ilrin announced, his voice heavier now. "We are sending a diplomatic mission to establish a deterrence. Captain Hale, as the human representative, you will escort them." Hale inclined his head. "Understood. I'll prep my crew." The avian delegate's beak clicked in amusement. "Will you bring your partner to the negotiations as well?" Perhaps the Creel will be swayed by wagging tails. "Maybe," Hale said without smiling, "they'll be swayed by the teeth that come after." A few alien voices hissed at the perceived threat. Railvek's eyes narrowed in interest. When the session adjourned, Hale led Rex out into the docking concourse. Starliners loomed beyond the glass, gleaming hulls against the endless dark. Rex's gaze swept the area, every muscle ready. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply walked with that quiet, self-contained readiness that Hale had come to rely on more than most people he knew. As they approached the boarding ramp, Railvek stepped into their path. "Captain," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "I've been assigned to observe your mission." Hale raised an eyebrow. "Observation or babysitting?" "Both, perhaps," Railvek replied. His slitted eyes slid to Rex. "You understand many here view your companion as a liability?" Hale clipped his response. "He's part of my team. You'll see why before this is over." Behind them, unnoticed, a figure lingered near a maintenance console, skin the dull gray of old steel, eyes hidden behind a data visor. Krill. His gaze tracked the human and the dog as they boarded. His mouth twitched into the shadow of a smile. The Starliner's doors sealed with a hydraulic hiss. Engines hummed, thrusters warming. Hale felt the subtle vibration beneath his boots as the docking clamps released. Outside, the station lights fell away, replaced by the sharp brilliance of distant stars. In the observation lounge, delegates murmured to one another in their native tongues. Some still eyed Rex with a mix of suspicion and amusement. A chitinous ambassador leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "If danger comes, will that beast negotiate peace for him?" The reply came with a chuckle, "Perhaps it will fetch the invaders a stick." Railvek didn't join the laughter. Instead, he watched as Rex sat at Hale's feet, every sense tuned to the room. The dog's ears flicked toward each voice, each shuffle of movement. His nose twitched, cataloging scents the aliens couldn't imagine. And somewhere in the far corner of the ship, hidden in the whirring labyrinth of machinery, the Creel spy made his first encrypted transmission. Coordinates set. Crew size estimated. Weapons loadout noted. His superiors would be pleased. In the lounge, Hale leaned forward, speaking softly to Rex. "Something's coming, boy. I can feel it." Rex's head lifted. His gaze locked on the sealed bulkhead at the rear of the lounge, as if he could see through steel and into the dark beyond. His ears flattened. Railvek noticed. His scales tightened across his shoulders in a reflex older than his species' written history. "What does he sense?" he asked. Hale didn't look up. Trouble. For a moment, nothing moved except the stars sliding past the viewport. Then the ship's intercom crackled to life, summoning all security personnel to the lower decks. Hale rose instantly. Rex was already on his feet, every muscle wired for motion. They moved together toward the source of the call, unaware that this mission, and every alien assumption about humanity's pets, was about to be shattered. And somewhere in the shadows, the Creel spy smiled again. The call from the intercom was clipped, urgent, and carried a tone that didn't belong on a diplomatic voyage. Hale was moving before the voice had finished speaking, boots striking a measured but rapid rhythm on the deck. Rex kept pace without hesitation, head low, eyes sharp. Railvek followed, his longer strides catching up quickly. "Security breach?" he asked. "Sounds like it," Hale replied without slowing. "And if it is, it's already too late for comfort." They reached the lift and descended to the lower decks. The doors slid open to a corridor already thick with tension. 2 human crewmen stood there, weapons drawn, their eyes snapping to Hale in relief. "Captain," one said, "sensors picked up a breach in Cargo Bay 3, but internal scanners are dead in that sector. We think they cut them." "That's not pirate style," Hale muttered. "That's military precision." Rex's ears twitched, then flattened again. His body stiffened. Hale didn't need a translator. Something was moving in that darkness. He led the way down the narrow hall toward the bay access, keeping his voice low. "Railvek, stay behind cover. I'm not here to impress the council. I'm here to keep them alive." Railvek's slit pupils thinned to razor lines. "I'm not fragile, human." "Neither is Rex," Hale said, "but I still don't throw him into blind corners." The bay doors loomed ahead, heavy, reinforced, and now ajar by a hand's width. That gap was worse than if they'd been wide open. It suggested an enemy confident enough to leave a sign of their entry. Hale glanced down at Rex. "Quiet." The dog dropped instantly into a low stalk, paws silent on the deck. They slipped inside, the lighting dimmed to an amber emergency glow. Cargo containers stood in towering rows, shadows pooling between them. The air carried a metallic tang, not blood, not yet, but the scent of weapons ready to speak. Then movement, quick, deliberate. A figure in dull gray armor stepping from behind a crate, weapon raised. The Creel. Hale was faster. His sidearm came up and barked once, the report snapping through the bay. The Creel staggered back, armor scorched, but more shadows moved in behind him. "Back." Hale ordered, firing again, driving them toward cover. Railvek ducked behind a crate, his scaled hands curling into claws. "They're not here for cargo. They're here for leverage," Hale said grimly. "The delegates." The Creel surged forward in a coordinated push. Hale's shots dropped too, but one managed to flank left. Rex exploded into motion, a streak of muscle and fury hitting the attacker mid-charge. The alien's weapon clattered to the floor as Rex's teeth found purchase in the crook of his armored shoulder, wrenching him sideways with raw, violent force. Hale fired past Rex, dropping another that tried to take advantage of the distraction. The remaining raiders fell back, but not in panic, in coordination. They were hurting, not retreating. The comm in Hale's ear crackled to life. "Captain, we've got armed hostiles on the diplomatic deck." "Repeat, hostiles on the diplomatic." The voice cut off in static. Hale's stomach tightened. "They're splitting forces." Railvek emerged from cover, his voice low. "They'll take the leaders alive." The Creel sell their captives for ransom or worse. Not on my watch, Hale thought. They moved fast through the ship's corridors, Rex ranging slightly ahead, nose working, tail stiff. The further they climbed toward the upper decks, the more chaos bled into the air, shouts, the thud of boots, the hiss of energy weapons discharging. They rounded a corner and came face to face with the scene Hale had feared. Half a dozen Creel forcing a cluster of delegates down the hall at gunpoint. The aliens' postures were rigid with terror. The avian delegates' feathers flared in panic, the insectoids' chitin clattered softly with trembling. Hale raised his weapon. Let them go. The lead Creel tilted his head, visor glinting. His voice was guttural like gravel sliding in a drum. Drop your weapon, human. Or watch the talking meat fall one by one. Hale's eyes flicked over the scene, calculating. Rex growled low in his throat, every line of his body coiled for the spring. You think you're walking out of here, Hale said evenly, but you're not. The Creel leader laughed, a sound without humor. What will you do? Send your pet to fetch? The insult was deliberate baiting. Hale didn't rise to it. You've already made your mistake. And then Rex moved. It was not a bark, not a charge, but a predator's silent, perfect launch. His body hit the nearest Creel before the alien could fully react, jaws locking on the wrist that held his weapon. The blaster fired into the ceiling, showering sparks as the alien screamed. Hale fired in the same motion, dropping another raider before the group could turn their guns on Rex. The delegates scattered to the walls, diving for whatever cover they could find. But the Creel were many, and in the chaos the leader closed the gap. Hale pivoted to meet him, catching the swing of a weighted blade on the forearm of his uniform. Pain flared, white and sharp, but he stayed on his feet. Rex tore free from his opponent and lunged at the leader, but a second Creel's boot caught him in the ribs mid-leap, slamming him into the wall. The dog yelped, once but didn't stay down. Hale's eyes snapped to that sound, something deep and dangerous igniting in him. He brought his weapon up, but the leader was faster this time, knocking it away and driving him back toward the wall. You'll make good bait, the Creel snarled, pinning him. Hale felt the cold edge of metal press against his throat. His mind catalogued the positions. Railvec closing from the left, Rex already back on his feet, lip curled, chest heaving. The leader shifted his grip just slightly, tightening for the finishing stroke. And in that fraction of a second, Hale saw the flicker of motion, Rex's body coiling, every muscle snapping forward into the leap. And then teeth closed around alien flesh again, and the world went white with sound. Rex hit the Creel leader with the weight of an avalanche, his jaws locking deep into the alien's forearm. The blade clattered to the deck as the leader roared, trying to wrench free. Hale used the opening, driving his shoulder into the Creel's chest and forcing him back. The corridor erupted into motion, delegates scrambling away, Creel fighters shouting in their harsh tongue, Railvec surging into the fray with claws bared. One of the raiders lunged for Hale's fallen weapon, but Railvec intercepted, slamming the alien against the wall hard enough to dent the paneling. Rex refused to release his grip, even as the leader's free hand pounded against his ribs. Hale saw the dog's muscles straining, his teeth red now, and shouted, "Hold!" The word was sharp, deliberate, not to stop him but to anchor him. Rex's growl deepened, steady and unyielding. Another Creel tried to flank from the side, but Hale snatched the alien's weapon and fired point blank. The smell of scorched armor filled the air. Behind him, the leader stumbled under Rex's relentless assault, and Hale knew the tide could turn, if they moved fast. Secure the delegates. Hale barked. Railvec swept two of them toward the lift, his tail lashing behind him like a whip. The avian ambassador hesitated, her eyes darting to Rex, but Railvec snapped, "Go!" and shoved her forward. Then the deck shuddered beneath them, a vibration too deep and sudden to be anything but a boarding clamp disengaging. Hale's mind snapped to the only possibility. The Creel had a shuttle docked and were trying to retreat with whomever they'd already taken. He ripped Rex away from the leader, both man and dog breathing hard. "We're not done yet," he said, his eyes on the far end of the corridor. The leader stumbled back, clutching his mangled arm. His voice was a rasp. "You'll die in the dark, human." Hale leveled the stolen weapon at his head. "Not today." They moved, Hale and Rex side by side, Railvec covering the rear. The ship's internal lighting flickered as if straining under the assault. Somewhere ahead, doors slammed shut, sealing sections off. Hale's instincts told him they were being funneled, forced toward the Creel's extraction point. They reached the shuttle bay to find it crawling with raiders. A small, angular transport squatted at the center, its ramp lowered. Hale spotted 2 human crew members bound at its base, a third struggling against a guard's grip. One wrong move and they'd be gone. Rex's body went rigid, his gaze locked on the captives. Hale recognized that tension, not fear but a predator's focus. "We can't storm them head-on," Railvek hissed. "Then we don't," Hale replied. "We cut them apart before they see us coming." The 3 of them slipped into the maze of supply crates lining the bay's edge. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. Hale's breathing slowed, the noise of battle faded into a single rhythm. His heart, Rex's padded steps, Railvek's claws scraping faintly against the deck. A lone Creel guard patrolled near the far wall. Hale gestured, and Rex slipped into the shadows without a sound. A moment later, the alien dropped with a muffled grunt, Rex standing over him with his jaws still glistening. They moved closer, weaving between cover. 2 raiders stood on the ramp, scanning for threats they expected to come from the main entrance, not from behind their own supply line. Hale signaled, and Railvek vaulted the crates, hitting the first one with bone-snapping force. Hale's shot took the second before he could raise an alarm. The bay fell into a brittle silence, not safe, just paused. Hale stepped forward, training his weapon on the shuttle's open hatch. And then everything broke at once. From within the shuttle, more Creel poured out, weapons ready, their leader among them, arm hastily bandaged. The air thickened with blaster fire, sizzling bolts ricocheting off containers. Hale ducked low, returning fire in bursts. Rex lunged forward again, cutting through the chaos, his path a line of sheer intent toward the nearest captive. He reached the bound crewman, positioning himself between the prisoner and incoming fire, teeth bared, every muscle daring anyone to come closer. Hale fought toward him, every shot purposeful, stripping the Creel's numbers one by one. But there were too many, and the leader was pushing forward with grim determination. Railvek fought like a cornered beast, his scales scored by near misses, his eyes burning with something Hale hadn't seen in him before, loyalty raw and personal. A shot seared past Hale's arm, leaving the smell of burnt fabric. He dropped behind a crate, scanning for Rex. The dog was still in guard position, but a new threat had emerged. A Creel creeping along the flank, blade drawn, aiming to take Rex from the side. Hale's shout came a fraction too late. The blade slashed, catching Rex along the flank. The dog yelped, spinning toward the attacker with fury. Teeth met flesh in an instant, but Hale saw the blood soaking Rex's side. Something primal surged through him, pushing him out of cover and into the open. His shots came faster, sharper, each one finding its mark. The Creel leader hesitated, eyes narrowing as he reassessed. Hale reached Rex, his free hand on the dog's neck. "You're still with me," he muttered. Rex's growl answered. The Creel regrouped at the ramp, the leader shouting orders in his guttural tongue. Hale realized their goal had shifted. They were no longer trying to take prisoners. Now they wanted to eliminate threats. Railvek landed beside him, chest heaving. "We can't hold this position. Not like this." Hale scanned the bay, his mind running through options. The shuttle was their only escape route, and also the Creel's. He looked at Rex, still standing despite the wound, still ready. Then he looked at Railvek. "We take the shuttle." The leader barked another order, and the Creel began advancing again. Hale tightened his grip on his weapon. "On my signal," he said. The 3 of them moved as one. Hale's shots tore into the advancing line, Railvek broke into a sprint for the ramp, and Rex charged straight for the leader. The dog hit him low, driving him backward with a force that seemed impossible for his size. Hale followed, closing the gap. The ramp became a storm of motion, claws, teeth, blaster fire, the leader's guttural curses. Hale's vision narrowed to a single objective: get aboard and end this. And then, as he reached the threshold, the shuttle's engines roared to life. The deck vibrated under his boots. The Creel weren't just leaving, they were taking off now, with or without their full crew. Hale's eyes locked with the leaders across the chaos. Neither spoke. The fight wasn't over. It was only about to change battlegrounds. The shuttle's engines screamed as it lifted from the bay floor, the sudden surge of inertia throwing Hale sideways against the bulkhead. He caught himself on the ramp's edge, teeth clenched, weapon still in hand. Rex was already inside, locked in a furious struggle with the Creel leader, their movements a violent blur of teeth, claws, and armored limbs. Railvek barreled up the ramp behind him, his scaled frame moving with predatory purpose. Hale pushed forward into the cramped hold, the air thick with the scent of scorched metal and blood. The shuttle's interior was built for speed and intimidation, its narrow passageways designed to funnel enemies into kill zones. Hale used that to his advantage, firing short, precise bursts that drove the creel into tighter corners. Railvec moved like a living blade at his side, his claws cutting through armor with terrifying efficiency. The leader bellowed an order, and 2 raiders broke from the fight, rushing for the cockpit. Hale knew their plan: gain altitude, break from the docking corridor, and jump to faster than light before the Union ship could get a lock. If that happened, there would be no rescue, no second chance. Railvec. Hale's voice was sharp over the din. Cockpit. The reptilian warrior didn't hesitate. He vaulted over a fallen creel, crashing into the narrow hallway after the fleeing raiders. The sound of his pursuit faded into the shuttle's mechanical hum, leaving Hale face to face with the leader once more. The alien was bleeding heavily from Rex's earlier assault, but his movements were still fast, still calculated. He feinted low, then drove upward with a brutal knee that caught Hale in the ribs. Pain flared white-hot, but Hale didn't fall. He shoved back, using his weight to pin the leader against the bulkhead. Rex seized the opening. He lunged for the alien's weapon arm, teeth sinking deep, dragging him sideways. The leader roared and swung hard, striking Rex across the side of the head. The blow would have dropped most creatures. Rex's grip only tightened. "Hold him," Hale growled, and Rex obeyed without question. Hale ripped the alien's weapon free and slammed the butt of it into his jaw. The leader crumpled to one knee, still struggling, still defiant. From the cockpit came the sound of a scuffle, Railvec's voice, low and guttural, followed by the sharp crack of bone. The shuttle's nose dipped suddenly, the inertial shift sending both Hale and the leader sprawling. Rex kept his footing, planting himself between Hale and the alien, his body angled protectively. Hale rose slowly, his weapon trained on the creel. "It's over," he said, voice flat. The leader spat something in his native tongue, a phrase that carried the weight of a promise. Hale didn't need a translation to understand. Some enemies would rather die than surrender. Railvec reappeared in the doorway, his scales dusted with blood. "Cockpit's ours," he said, his voice steady. "What do you want done with him?" Hale glanced at Rex, whose eyes never left the leader. "We land the shuttle. We hand him over alive." The creel's eyes narrowed, the realization of survival sinking in like an insult. But Hale didn't care about his pride. Dead enemies couldn't answer questions. Railvec took the controls, swinging the shuttle in a sharp arc back toward the Union ship. The stars shifted in the viewport, the enemy vessel now shrinking behind them. Hale leaned against the bulkhead, breathing hard, the adrenaline in his veins beginning to fade. Rex stepped to his side, pressing against his leg. Hale rested a hand on the dog's head, his fingers finding the spot just behind the ear that always made him relax. The faint tremor under his palm told him Rex was running on sheer will now, his flank still bleeding from the earlier slash. "You did good," Hale said softly. "Better than good." The landing was rough but controlled. Union security swarmed the ramp as it dropped, weapons raised, eyes scanning the hold. The delegates, freed and shaken, were guided out first. Then the creel leader, bound and silent, flanked by guards. Hale followed last, Rex at his side, the two of them moving as if tied by an invisible thread. Railvec walked a step behind, his gaze shifting between man and dog. There was no mockery now, no skepticism, only a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. Back aboard the main vessel, medics closed in. Hale waved them toward Rex first. The dog didn't resist as they cleaned the wound and sealed it with biofoam, though his eyes stayed locked on Hale the entire time. One of the medics glanced up. "He's lucky," she said. Hale shook his head. "No. I'm lucky." Later, when the adrenaline had faded and the creel were secured in holding, Hale found himself alone in the observation lounge with Railvec. The alien leaned against the railing, the glow of distant stars reflected in his eyes. "In my culture," Railvec said, "creatures that cannot fight for themselves are left behind. We do not waste our strength on them." "And what do you think now?" Hale asked. Railvec studied Rex, who lay stretched at Hale's feet, head resting on his paws. "I think," he said slowly, "that perhaps strength is not only in the one who fights, but in the one who inspires the fight." Hale didn't reply. He didn't need to. Railvec turned back to the stars. "The council laughed at you for bringing him," he said. "They will not laugh again." The quiet between them was unbroken for a long moment, until Hale spoke, his voice low. "The thing they don't get is that he's not mine. We belong to each other." Railvec inclined his head, the alien equivalent of a nod. "Pack," he said simply. In the stillness, Rex shifted closer, his body pressing against Hale's boots. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, but here, inside this small circle of light, there was warmth, and the unspoken promise that if danger ever came again, it would find them both ready. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, word would spread. Not just about the human who fought like a cornered predator, but about the creature at his side, and the truth every Creel warrior would carry in their memory from this day forward. Threaten the human's companion and you face them both. Neither will stop until you are gone. The debriefing chamber was quiet, save for the low hum of the ship's life support systems. Hale sat at the long table, elbows resting on the polished surface, his eyes fixed on the Creel leader seated across from him. The alien's wrists were locked in magnetic restraints, but the coiled tension in his posture made it clear he was far from broken. Rex sat at Hale's side, calm but alert, his gaze fixed unwaveringly on the prisoner. Every so often, the Creel's eyes flicked toward the dog, and though his expression didn't change, there was something in the subtle tightening of his jaw, recognition, perhaps even unease. Union Security Command had been pressuring Hale for hours to turn the Creel over for immediate transport to a secure facility. But Hale had insisted on one final meeting before the transfer. There were still questions unanswered, and Hale had a gnawing sense that whatever the Creel had planned wasn't finished. "You came here to take hostages?" Hale began, voice steady. "But that wasn't the primary objective, was it?" The Creel's mouth curled into a faint smile. "Humans always believe the first move is the whole game. You see only the piece before you, never the board beneath." Hale leaned forward slightly. "Then enlighten me." The alien tilted his head. "What? So you can bring your pet to my world and threaten us with his teeth?" Rex's ears twitched at the tone, but he didn't move. His stillness was more dangerous than a growl. Hale placed a hand lightly on his back, not to restrain him, but to feel the slow, deliberate rise and fall of his breathing. "You've made one mistake," Hale said, his voice low, "and it's the same one every Creel who's ever faced us makes. You think you understand the limits of what we'll do for those we care about." The alien's smirk faltered for just an instant. Before the Creel could speak again, the chamber doors hissed open. Railvek stepped inside, his talons clicking lightly against the floor. "Captain," he said, his tone edged with urgency, "we've intercepted a transmission. Creel strike ships are on approach. They've bypassed our perimeter satellites. Whoever this one is, he was the opening act." Hale's mind moved instantly to the larger implications. The captured leader hadn't come to succeed, he'd come to distract. "How long until contact?" Hale asked. 8 minutes, Railvek replied. "Less if they push their drives." The Creel leader's smile returned, sharp as a blade. "You think you've won something here? You've only bought yourself a seat to watch the real hunt." Hale rose from his chair. "You've got the wrong species if you think we sit and watch." He motioned to Railvek. "Get the ship into combat position. Pull non-combatants to the lower decks and seal bulkheads. And keep him locked down, triple guard rotation." Railvek nodded and moved quickly, already issuing orders into his comm. Hale turned to leave but paused, glancing back at the Creel. "One last thing, you'll still be here when your fleet is gone. Think about what that means." Minutes later, Hale was on the command deck, strapping into the tactical station. The main display lit up with red markers, Creel strike ships fanning into an attack pattern. Smaller escort craft zipped ahead, designed to disable defenses before the heavier ships could close in. Rex padded onto the deck, positioning himself at Hale's side as though he'd been assigned a post. Nobody questioned it anymore. "Bring weapons online," Hale ordered. "Target their escorts first, cut their teeth before they bite." The ship's cannons roared to life, and the first Creel craft shattered under the barrage. But the rest didn't break formation. They were fast, coordinated, and committed. As the fight escalated, Hale found his mind splitting between the tactical feed and the gut instinct that had kept him alive through more battles than he could count. Something about their approach didn't feel right. They weren't committing enough ships to actually overwhelm the Union vessel. Which meant, "They're not here to destroy us," Hale muttered. "They're here to get something." Railvek's voice came over comms from the lower decks. "Captain, they're breaching in Sector C. That's the holding cells," Hale finished, already moving. He didn't wait for backup. He and Rex tore through the corridors, the thud of boots and the rapid patter of paws in sync. Ahead, the sound of weapons fire echoed through the metal halls. When Hale rounded the corner, he saw them, Creel soldiers forcing their way toward the reinforced cell doors, cutting through the lock with a portable plasma torch. "Rex!" Hale barked, and the dog lunged forward without hesitation. He hit the nearest Creel hard, knocking him back into the wall. Hale's rifle barked twice, dropping another before he could bring his weapon to bear. The remaining soldiers turned their focus on Hale, but that gave Rex the opening to dart in and drag one down by the arm. The fight was fast, brutal, and close quarters. Hale's movements were instinctual: step inside the swing, drive the rifle but into the joint, pivot, fire. Rex moved like a shadow, his presence forcing the Creel to divide their attention in ways they couldn't afford. Within moments, the corridor was silent except for the low hum of the cell locks re-engaging. The breach team was down, but Hale knew the strike outside wasn't finished. Railvek arrived, his armor scorched, eyes narrowing at the scene. "If they wanted him out, they'll try again," he said. "They won't get the chance," Hale replied. "Because we're ending this now." Back on the command deck, Hale pushed the ship into a counteroffensive. He fed targeting data into the fire control system manually, exploiting gaps in the Creel formation they didn't expect a human to see. With every ship they took down, the remaining attackers became more desperate, more erratic. Finally, the largest strike ship broke formation, its engines flaring as it turned to flee. Hale didn't hesitate. Lock and fire. The blast ripped through the ship's core, and the rest of the Creel scattered into retreat. The battle was over. The crew erupted in relieved shouts, but Hale stayed silent, eyes scanning the battlefield until the last hostile blip faded from the sensors. Only then did he kneel beside Rex, who sat panting but uninjured, eyes still locked on the empty space where the enemy had been. "You kept him safe," Hale murmured, and he meant the whole ship, not just the prisoner. Later, as the debris field drifted quietly outside, Railvek approached. "I told you once that my people leave behind those who cannot fight," he said. "After today I see the flaw in that." Hale met his gaze. "Strength isn't just teeth and claws. Sometimes it's knowing someone will use theirs for you." Railvek glanced at Rex, then back to Hale. "You've changed the way I see your kind." Hale smirked faintly. "You and your council should stop calling them pets then." Railvek gave a slow nod. "Perhaps, protectors is closer." Rex shifted, resting his head on Hale's boot. Outside, the stars shone indifferent and eternal, but aboard the ship, the crew knew something had shifted. Word of the battle, and of the human who fought with his companion at his side, would travel far. And somewhere, among the Creel who survived, the story would twist into a warning. Not about humanity's weapons or ships, but about the quiet, deadly promise that came with threatening what a human loved. A promise that Hale and Rex had proven beyond any doubt. No matter the odds, they would stand together, and that was a fight no predator could win.